At 17 years old, I stood in a courtroom fighting to legally separate myself from the two people who were supposed to protect me, my parents. The same people who had stolen my identity, opened credit cards in my name, and buried me under $30,000 of debt before I was old enough to vote. They called it family sacrifice. The judge called it financial exploitation, and that courtroom was only the beginning of what they would put me through. My name is Natalie. I am 30 years old now, and if you have ever felt like the family you were born into saw you as a resource instead of a person, this story is for you. I grew up in a fading factory town called Ridgewood, Ohio, the kind of place where nothing ever changes except for the worse. Factories that had employed generations were closing one by one. Storefronts on Main Street sat empty with faded for lease signs that nobody bothered to take down. The people who stayed did so because they could not afford to leave. My family was no different. My father, Leonard, worked maintenance at one of the last remaining manufacturing plants in the county. He came home every night with grease under his fingernails and complaints about overtime getting cut. My mother, Patricia, worked part-time at a grocery store. She said it was for the employee discount, but I think she needed a reason to leave the house. Money was always the background noise of my childhood. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, past due notices mixed in with junk mail like they belonged there. The cable got shut off every few months until someone remembered to pay it. We pretended it was normal. Maybe for us, it was. Then there was my brother Marcus. Marcus was 2 years older than me, captain of the junior varsity football team, popular with all the right people. He had this natural charm that made everyone gravitate toward him. Teachers loved him. Coaches praised him. Our parents worshipped the ground he walked on. The comparison between us started before I could even understand what was happening. Why can you not be more like Marcus? That question was the soundtrack of my childhood. My father said it when I brought home a less than perfect grade. My mother said it when I forgot a chore. Marcus said it just to twist the knife. It never stopped. It became so constant that I started to believe something was fundamentally wrong with me. I was different from other kids. While everyone else obsessed over sports or school drama or who was dating who, I wanted to understand how things worked. I would take apart old electronics just to see what was inside. Broken radios, dead clocks, discarded computers people left on the curb. Anything mechanical or electronic fascinated me. This did not make me popular at home. My father had this particular look he would give me when he found me surrounded by scattered parts on the kitchen table, disappointment mixed with confusion, like I was speaking a language he did not want to learn. My mother would just sigh and tell me to clean up the mess before dinner. But there was one place I did not feel like a waste of space. Shop class and the computer lab at school. My teacher, Mr. DeLuca, actually understood what I was trying to do. He would let me stay after school to work on projects, taught me proper soldering techniques, showed me how to troubleshoot electrical systems, treated me like I had potential instead of problems. The only family member who treated me with any kindness was my cousin Elena. She was a year older than me and worked part-time at her father's auto repair shop. Elena had this way of making tense situations feel lighter. When family dinners turned into criticism sessions aimed at me, she would crack some joke that diffused everything without making herself a target. She knew how to navigate our family in ways I never could. Everything changed one ordinary Thursday afternoon when I was 14 years old. I was walking home from school, taking my usual route through the neighborhood, when I noticed our neighbor Mr. Kowalski hauling items to the curb. He was clearing out his garage, piling things up for trash pickup. And sitting right there among the discarded junk was an old point-of-sale system from his hardware store. The machine looked ancient, probably from the early 2000s, dusty and clearly broken. But something about it caught my attention. I could see the potential buried under the grime. I asked Mr. Kowalski if I could have it. He laughed and told me the repair shop wanted $300 just to look at it, said it was cheaper to buy a new one. Then he shrugged and told me to take it if I wanted. Just get it off his curb. That broken point-of-sale system became my entire world for the next month. Every afternoon after school, I disappeared into our basement, took the machine apart piece by piece, read technical manuals I found online, watched YouTube videos about outdated retail systems, studied diagrams until my eyes burned. Our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, would sometimes poke her head into the basement and ask what I was doing. She was one of those neighbors who knew everything about everyone. nosy in a way that was somehow helpful rather than annoying. She would bring me snacks and tell me about other people in the neighborhood who had broken electronics collecting dust in their garages. The day I finally got that system working was one of the proudest moments of my young life. I typed in test transactions and watched them process on the screen. The machine that everyone had written off as worthless was alive again because of me. Mr. Kowalski saw the repaired system a few weeks later when he came over to borrow my father's ladder. He could not believe it was the same machine, mentioned what I had done to the owner of an auto parts store on Main Street. Next thing I knew, a man named Rick showed up at our front door offering me $50 to look at his shop's point of sale system that kept freezing during transactions. I fixed it in 2 hours. It was a simple software issue, a corrupted database that needed rebuilding. Nothing complicated once I understood what I was looking at. Rick watched me work the entire time, asking questions about what I was doing and why. When I finished, he handed me $75 instead of the agreed 50. He said I explained it so he actually understood what was wrong. That was worth something. If you are watching this right now, let me know in the comments which city you are tuning in from. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Word spread fast in a small town like Ridgewood. Within a month, the owner of a contractor supply shop asked if I could set up an inventory tracking system for his business. Then a garage wanted help modernizing their parts database. Then a plumbing supply company needed their ancient registers replaced. These were all blue-collar businesses running on equipment that was barely functional. They could not afford the expensive corporate solutions that cost thousands of dollars and required ongoing contracts. But they would gladly pay a teenager a few $100s to keep their systems running. I set up a workspace in our basement, found a sturdy workbench at a yard sale, organized my tools, started keeping spare parts salvaged from broken systems. By the time I turned 15, I was bringing home $300 to $400 every single week, more money than I had ever seen in my life. My parents finally noticed. At first, my father complained about my equipment taking up space in the basement. Never mind that the space had been empty and unused before I claimed it. But when I brought home $600 in a single month, suddenly their attitude changed. My mother sat me down and explained that I needed to contribute to the household, start paying my way. She took half of everything I earned. I was 15 years old, still a child, still living under their roof and eating their food and following their rules. But apparently, I owed them for the privilege of existing. Arguing did not get me anywhere, so I learned to adapt. I started keeping 2 sets of books, one that showed my parents what they expected to see, and another that tracked what I actually earned. They took their cut from the visible income. The rest went into a lockbox. I hid behind the water heater in the basement. Meanwhile, Marcus got a brand new laptop for school, got gas money whenever he asked, got his football equipment paid for without anyone questioning the expense. My business? According to my father, it was just a phase I would grow out of, a distraction from focusing on things that actually mattered, like being more like my brother. But my business kept growing, despite their dismissal. Auto parts stores, hardware shops, small contractor supply companies. They all had the same problems. Systems that barely worked, no real inventory tracking, everything done on paper or ancient computers, held together by hope and duct tape. I started building custom solutions tailored to each business. Simple point-of-sale systems with basic inventory management. Reliable, affordable, and designed for people who worked with their hands instead of spreadsheets. By 16, I was making more money than my mother's part-time job brought in. I hired Elena to help me with installations. She was good with her hands from working at her father's shop and could talk to customers without sounding like a nervous kid. We split the job 70-30. She was happy for the extra income while I was building something real. That is when I made the mistake of trying to share my success with my parents. I brought home a check larger than usual, $900 from setting up a complete system for a plumbing supply company 2 towns over. I showed it to my parents at dinner, probably hoping for some recognition, some acknowledgement that I was doing something worthwhile. My father's eyes went wide when he saw the numbers. The very next day, he sat me down with a serious expression and explained that now that I was earning real money, I needed to start paying rent, $400 every single month, for a bedroom in a house they already owned. In my parents' minds, I owed them for 16 years of housing and food and everything else they had provided. The fact that providing for your children is literally the legal responsibility of parents did not seem to factor into their calculations. This became the established pattern. The more I earned, the more they took. Rent turned into household contributions. Household contributions turned into covering whatever expense they needed that month. Marcus needs textbooks for his college prep courses. That is coming from Natalie. The car needs new tires before winter. Natalie will cover it. The roof is leaking again. Natalie's business money will fix it. I learned quickly that there were two completely different standards in our house. One for Marcus, where everything was handed to him on a silver platter, and one for me, where everything I earned was taken away. The real wake-up call came right after I turned 17. A credit card statement arrived in the mail. My name was printed clearly on the front, but it was for an account I had never opened. I had never applied for a credit card, never signed any paperwork. Then another statement arrived, and another, 3 different credit cards, all opened in my name, all completely maxed out. $28,000 of debt tied to my social security number before I was old enough to legally sign a contract. I sat on my bed staring at those statements for hours, running the numbers over and over, calculating how long it would take to pay off that amount on minimum wage. The answer made me physically ill. I confronted my parents that evening, walked into the living room and threw the statements onto the coffee table right in front of them. My mother did not even attempt to deny it. She said Marcus needed a car for college. They needed to fix the roof. My business had given us good credit, so they used it. I told her she had committed identity theft, stolen my name and my future. My father barely looked up from the television. He told me not to be dramatic, said it was family money anyway, that I had been living in their house for years. I reminded him I had been paying $400 a month in rent for the past year. He said, now I would pay more. He called it my contribution to my brother's future, like it was settled, like I had no say in the matter. That night, Marcus walked past my bedroom door on his way down the hall. He stopped and leaned against the frame with this smirk on his face. Thanks for the car, little sis. Really appreciate it. Then he walked away, laughing. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that I had to escape. I called Elena first thing the next morning. We met at a diner on the edge of town where nobody from school would see us. I spread the credit card statements across the table between our cups of burnt coffee. Elena studied the numbers in silence, then looked at me with shock written across her face. She said this was identity theft. Straight up illegal regardless of who did it. I told her they were still my parents. She said it did not matter. Crime is crime. Elena connected me with a lawyer her mother knew, a woman named Marlene, who sometimes took cases without charging her full fee for people who could not afford representation. She reviewed everything I had gathered and laid out my options clearly. I could press criminal charges against my parents. They would likely face jail time if convicted. Or I could pursue legal emancipation, a court process that would legally separate me from my parents before turning 18. It would sever their control over my finances and my life. I could not bring myself to send my parents to prison. Despite everything they had done, despite all the ways they had failed me, some part of me still thought of them as my parents. But emancipation would free me, cut every legal tie, make me a legal adult with full control over my own existence. Building the case took 3 months of careful documentation. I gathered everything: the unauthorized credit card applications with my forged signature, bank statements showing consistent income from my business, recordings I secretly made of conversations where my parents casually discussed using my earnings like the money belonged to them, documentation of every single dollar I had contributed to household expenses while still a minor. The hardest part was not collecting evidence. It was accepting that I was actually doing this, preparing to legally separate myself from the people who raised me. My resolve solidified completely the day I caught my mother sitting at the kitchen computer, applying for a 4th credit card. She was using my social security number, typing it in like it was her own. She did not even try to hide what she was doing when I walked in, just closed the laptop casually and told me to mind my own business. The day my parents got served with the emancipation papers, our house transformed into a war zone. My father's face turned purple with rage. He screamed about betrayal, about everything they had sacrificed, about ungrateful children who turn on their own family. Marcus stood in the background, shaking his head slowly like I was the villain in this story. How could you do this to us? My mother asked through tears. Perfectly performed devastation, convincing enough to fool anyone who did not know the truth. I told her I was not doing anything to them. I was protecting myself. Marcus stepped forward, then said family takes care of each other, like he had not been benefiting from my exploitation his entire life. I told him funny, because I did not feel very taken care of. During the 3 weeks before my court hearing, I moved out of my parents' house and into the spare room of Bruce DeLuca. He was Mr. DeLuca's older brother, a retired electrician who lived alone in a house much too large for one person. He let me sleep on his couch, let me run my business from his garage, and helped me ignore the constant stream of phone calls from my parents demanding I come home immediately. They tried everything to derail my emancipation. They called my clients and told them I had stolen money from the family, showed up at Bruce's house, claiming I was a runaway who needed to be returned home. They even convinced our family priest to call me about the importance of honoring my parents. None of it worked. The courthouse hearing was one of the most difficult experiences of my life. My mother played the devastated parent with absolute perfection. She cried on the witness stand about her troubled daughter who had always been difficult, who had always been different. She claimed they had only taken control of my finances to help me, that I was just a confused child who did not understand how money worked. For a moment, I wondered if the judge would believe her, but then my lawyer presented the evidence. The credit card statements with forged signatures, the bank records showing my income, the recordings of my parents discussing how to use my money, the documentation of every expense I had covered while still a minor child. When the judge delivered her ruling, she did not hold back. She said the court clearly saw evidence of sustained financial exploitation that made continued cohabitation both harmful and impossible. She noted that my parents had treated their minor child as a financial resource rather than a dependent deserving of protection. She granted my petition for emancipation. At 17 years old, I became a legal adult, free from my parents, free from their control, free to build my own life. If this story is connecting with you, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and drop a like. It helps the channel grow and brings more stories like this to people who need to hear them. Bruce helped me find my first real apartment, a converted garage behind an old warehouse on the industrial side of town. Not glamorous, not comfortable, but it was mine. I filed the official paperwork establishing my business as a legal entity, opened bank accounts that my parents could not access or even know about, started building a life completely separate from everything I had known. But reality hit hard. After paying rent and covering business expenses, almost every dollar I earned went straight to minimum payments on that mountain of debt my parents had created. I made a detailed spreadsheet tracking everything, every payment, every balance, every interest charge. The initial projection showed it would take 6 years to pay off what they had stolen from me. 6 years of my life, paying for their choices, cleaning up their mess. My family cut contact completely. Marcus blocked my phone number. My parents acted as though I had ceased to exist. Relatives I had known my entire life stopped speaking to me overnight. That first Thanksgiving alone, I ate gas station fried chicken in my tiny apartment while working on a point-of-sale system for a hardware store in the next county. No family, no celebration, just me and my work. Mrs. Patterson tracked me down somehow, showed up at my door with a plate of homemade food and the mail that kept getting delivered to my old address. She did not ask questions, did not push for explanations, just handed me the plate and told me she was proud of what I was doing. Elena came by most weekends with snacks and updates from family dinners. I was not invited to. She would tell me about the drama, the fights about money, the way Marcus was struggling without someone else's income to supplement his lifestyle. She never pressured me to reconcile, never made me feel guilty, just kept showing up consistently. That mattered more than she probably understood. 8 months after my emancipation, the owner of a mid-sized auto parts chain approached me about overhauling his entire operation. 5 separate locations, all running different ancient systems, none of them able to communicate with each other. He wanted unified inventory tracking across every store with modern point-of-sale terminals. This was exponentially beyond anything I had tackled before. A project of this scope would have intimidated most professional IT firms. But I did not tell him that. I quoted him a price and a timeline that sounded confident. Then I spent the next 3 weeks in a state of controlled panic, studying everything I could find about network systems, teaching myself centralized database management, learning on the job in the most intense way possible. Elena helped with the physical installations at each location while I focused on the software and integration. We worked nights and weekends, testing, troubleshooting, fixing problems as they appeared, retesting until everything ran perfectly. When that system went live across all 5 stores and actually worked flawlessly, something shifted inside me. I had been thinking too small, playing it safe, taking the jobs I knew I could handle, instead of reaching for opportunities that would force me to grow. I pivoted my entire business model, started focusing exclusively on rugged point of sale and inventory management systems designed specifically for blue-collar businesses, auto parts stores, hardware shops, equipment rental companies, contractor supply warehouses. These were businesses run by people who worked with their hands, people who needed technology that was reliable and practical instead of flashy and complicated. I built a reputation for creating systems that just worked. Bulletproof setups that helped shops run smoother without requiring a computer science degree to operate. By 18, I had more clients than I could handle alone. Hired my first real employees, 2 students from the local community college who actually understood what they were doing, moved my operation from that cramped garage apartment to a proper commercial space I rented from the warehouse owner. One of my hires, a young man named Mason, who had worked retail for years, started suggesting features I never would have considered. Quick access keys for commonly sold items, shift reports formatted in ways that actually made sense to store managers, small improvements that made the systems dramatically more useful. A regional business journal ran a small piece about local companies using custom technology solutions, mentioned my business by name. That single article brought in clients from surrounding towns I had never even marketed to. A corporate representative approached me after a small business expo with an acquisition offer. His company wanted to buy my business outright, turn my systems into a product they could mass market. The number he offered would have cleared my debt immediately and left me with substantial savings. I considered it for about 10 minutes. Then I said no. This business was not just about money. It was proof that everyone who had written me off was wrong. Every person who had told me I would never amount to anything. Every family member who had treated me like a burden instead of a person. I was not selling that validation to anyone. The debt payments continued steadily. Every month, money disappearing into interest and principal reduction. Watching that number decrease slowly while my business grew was frustrating beyond description. I kept a second spreadsheet solely dedicated to tracking my debt payoff, updated it weekly, calculated how many additional clients I would need to double my payments, how many months each extra payment would shave off the total. The math kept me focused during the hardest days. Elena continued sharing family updates, whether I wanted to hear them or not. Marcus had been expelled from college for academic dishonesty, cheated on an exam and got caught, moved back home with no degree and no prospects. My parents were fighting constantly about money now that my income no longer subsidized their lifestyle. My mother had picked up extra shifts at the grocery store. My father's plant had announced another round of layoffs. Their house was deteriorating. The roof still leaked. The furnace was dying. All the problems my money used to solve were now piling up with no solution. Part of me felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy. A very small part. The rest of me remembered $28,000 in fraudulent debt that I was still paying off years later. Mrs. Patterson continued visiting periodically, would stop by my shop with homemade food and casual conversation, never pushed me to discuss my family unless I brought it up first, never judged my decisions, just maintained a steady supportive presence in my life without making demands. The debt finally reached zero about 1 month after my 23rd birthday. 6 years of grinding. 6 years of living as cheaply as possible. 6 years of directing every spare dollar toward payments on debt I never created. The day I made that final payment, I sat in my apartment, staring at the confirmation screen for a long time. Account balance, zero. Paid in full. I expected to feel triumphant, victorious, finally free. Instead, I felt strangely empty, like I had been so focused on that single goal for so long that reaching it left me without direction, without purpose. Elena came over that evening with takeout and questions. "What happens now?" she asked. I told her now. I get to figure out what I actually want. With the debt finally cleared, I could start thinking about the future instead of constantly paying for the past. Made my first real investment. Bought a small duplex that needed significant renovation work. Spent 6 months of evenings and weekends fixing it up properly, then rented out both units for steady passive income. For 6 years after emancipation, I had essentially zero contact with my family. Then an invitation arrived in the mail, plain white envelope, simple printed card inside. An invitation to celebrate my father's retirement from the manufacturing plant. I stared at that card for a long time, turning it over in my hands, trying to understand what it meant. Elena called the same day, asked if I had received it. Something about the situation felt wrong. After 6 years of complete silence, why would they suddenly want me present for a family celebration? Against every instinct screaming at me to stay away, I replied that I would attend. The retirement party was held at the VFW Hall in Ridgewood, standard blue-collar celebration. Bad coffee, sheet cake from the grocery store bakery, a slideshow of my father's career playing on a projector that nobody was really watching. Walking through those doors felt surreal. Familiar faces from my childhood scattered throughout the room, all of them looking at me with varying degrees of surprise. My parents approached together. My father had aged significantly, more gray hair, more weight around his middle, shoulders permanently hunched from decades of physical labor. My mother maintained her carefully styled appearance, but wore an expression of chronic dissatisfaction, like life had failed to meet her expectations. They introduced me to my father's coworkers as their other daughter who works with computers, dismissive even in the moment of supposed reconciliation. Throughout the evening, I stayed on the periphery, made small talk with people I barely remembered, observed the dynamics around me with growing suspicion. Something was definitely not right. The party seemed more expensive than a factory worker's retirement should warrant. The decorations, the catering, the open bar. Near the food table, I overheard my uncle talking with one of my father's former colleagues. He said now that Natalie was back in the picture, my father was hoping for some assistance. Said I had done well for myself. It was about time I stepped up for family. Later, I caught fragments of other conversations, plans for a recreational vehicle my father had supposedly purchased, my mother mentioning an expensive cruise they had booked, Marcus casually dropping that he had just made a down payment on a condominium in the city. None of it made any sense. Mrs. Patterson was there as well. She approached me quietly near the dessert table. "Interesting party," she said. "Lot of expensive choices for someone retiring from a factory job." I agreed that I had noticed the same thing. She lowered her voice. "Your parents have been telling everyone you are doing very well for yourself. Very well indeed." The way she said it made absolutely clear she was warning me about something. Driving home that night, I could not shake the feeling that I had walked into a carefully constructed trap. The sudden invitation after years of silence, the expensive celebration, the casual mentions of my success to everyone present, it all felt orchestrated. 4 weeks later, a courier arrived at my business with legal documents. Formal complaint. My parents and Marcus listed as plaintiffs. My name as defendant. They were suing me. The complaint claimed my business success had been built on early support and resources generously provided by my family. They demanded 35% ownership of my company, plus $150,000 in damages for emotional distress and lost opportunities. The attached affidavit from Marcus claimed I had stolen business opportunities that rightfully belonged to him, that our parents had invested heavily in my development while he received nothing, that I owed the family compensation for years of housing and support. Reading page after page of fabricated allegations, the retirement party finally made complete sense. It had been a setup from the beginning. They created a narrative of family reunion to establish publicly that we were reconciling, made sure plenty of witnesses saw us together in a positive context, gathered information about my business before launching their legal assault. I contacted my business attorney, Julian, within hours, forwarded every document immediately. His assessment after reviewing the complaint was direct. He called the allegations creative fiction, but he warned me that family lawsuits become extremely ugly extremely quickly. We needed to take this seriously. I assembled a full legal team within 3 days. Julian led the defense, brought back Marlene, who had handled my original emancipation. Their analysis was mixed. Legally speaking, my family's claims were complete garbage. I had been emancipated specifically because of documented financial exploitation. All the evidence from that original case was still on file. Their current allegations directly contradicted established court records. But my family was not trying to win in court. They wanted a settlement. They were betting that I would pay them off just to avoid the hassle and protect my business reputation from the negative publicity of a family lawsuit. That realization made me absolutely furious. I told my legal team to fight this case all the way to the end, spare no expense, no settlement, no negotiation. I wanted them to lose publicly and completely. Through the discovery process, we uncovered exactly how calculated and premeditated their scheme had been. Marcus had created fake social media profiles to connect with my clients, gathered information about my projects, revenue, and business relationships for over 2 years before the lawsuit. My parents had been systematically pumping Elena for information whenever she visited them, asking casual questions about how I was doing, getting her to share details about my success without realizing she was being manipulated. Most disturbing was evidence that someone had attempted to access my business bank accounts multiple times, using security question answers that referenced my childhood, information that only family members would know. The security implications were serious enough that I immediately implemented enhanced protection protocols on every account and system, changed every security question to answers that had nothing to do with my actual history or family. Elena was devastated when she learned they had been using her as an unwitting source. She said she had no idea. They would just ask how I was doing. She thought they actually cared about my well-being. I told her it was not her fault. They were skilled at manipulating people. They had been doing it my entire life. The emotional toll of the lawsuit was worse than the emancipation had been. I had spent 6 years building a life completely separate from my family, proved beyond any doubt that I could succeed entirely on my own merits. Now they were trying to claw their way back into my existence, not because they cared about me as a person, but because they saw money they believed they deserved. During depositions, their case collapsed completely under questioning. When asked about specific support they had provided to my early business development, my father claimed letting me use the basement was a significant contribution. My mother claimed she had provided emotional encouragement. Marcus could not articulate a single specific opportunity I had supposedly stolen from him, could not name one client or contract that should have been his. His entire claim evaporated under basic cross-examination. After 8 months of legal proceedings, Judge Eldridge issued his ruling. He dismissed the case entirely with a scathing written opinion, called their claims demonstrably false and potentially fraudulent, noted that the plaintiffs had attempted to exploit a family relationship for financial gain after years of documented exploitation and estrangement. He ordered them to pay my complete legal fees and all court costs. The total amount would likely force them to liquidate whatever assets they had remaining. Outside the courthouse, Marcus tried to approach me. He said this was ridiculous. We were family. I told him family does not commit identity theft. He asked if I was really going to let them lose everything because of this. I told him I was not doing anything to them. They did this to themselves. Every single decision that led them to this moment was their own choice. My father stood nearby looking utterly defeated. An old man who had gambled everything on exploiting his daughter one more time and lost. He said, "We raised you. We gave you everything." I told him, "No, you took everything, and I built something anyway." I walked away from that courthouse without looking back. The months following the lawsuit were strange. Complete legal victory, total vindication. But I was still processing years of manipulation and exploitation. I threw myself into work with renewed intensity, took on larger projects, expanded into new geographic markets, added maintenance contracts as a revenue stream, built a team of 12 employees who genuinely understood our mission. Elena continued providing updates about the family situation. Marcus still could not maintain steady employment, kept getting terminated for attitude problems and conflicts with supervisors. He had moved back in with our parents, who were now renting a small apartment after selling their house to cover legal debts and back taxes. My father's health was deteriorating, multiple issues compounding. My mother was working 2 jobs again, exhausted and bitter. I listened to these updates, but I did not engage. Their problems were not mine to solve. They had created their circumstances through their own choices. 2 years after the lawsuit, an email arrived from Marcus. His marriage had imploded. The condominium was in foreclosure. He was living with our parents in their cramped rental. The email did not directly request money, just said he was reassessing his priorities and wanted to clear the air between us. I did not respond. Some relationships cannot be repaired. Some trust, once destroyed, cannot be rebuilt. By 28, my company had grown beyond anything I had imagined possible. Over 200 active client accounts across 5 states, a team of dedicated employees, a reputation as the best in our specialized market. I found a property that felt right, a small house on 2 acres outside of town. Nothing extravagant, built in the 1960s. Needed significant renovation work, but it had good bones, and the price was reasonable. I had saved enough money to purchase it outright, no mortgage, no monthly payments, no bank involved. I walked into the closing meeting and wrote a check for the full amount. The title company representative looked at me with undisguised surprise. She said most people my age could not afford a down payment, let alone a full cash purchase. I told her I had been saving for a long time, spent 8 months renovating that house. Elena helped with the heavy work on weekends. We tore out walls and installed new windows and rebuilt the kitchen from the studs out. When it was finally finished, I hosted a small gathering, just my work team. Elena, a few friends I had made along the way. Mrs. Patterson arrived with enough food to feed 3 times as many people. Standing on my back porch that evening, as the sun went down, I felt something I could not quite name. Maybe contentment? Maybe just the absence of constant anxiety. For the first time in my adult life, I was not fighting, not surviving, not paying off someone else's debt or defending myself from someone else's attack. I was simply living, in a house I owned, running a business I had built, surrounded by people who had chosen to be in my life. My father attempted to reach out one final time, sent a message through Mrs. Patterson, wanted to talk, to reconcile, to make things right before it was too late. I told her I was not interested. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. Some doors, once closed, should stay locked. By 30, I had everything I had spent my entire adult life building toward. A successful company with consistent growth, a home I owned outright, meaningful relationships with people who valued me as a person instead of a resource. If you are still watching, I want you to know something important. Whatever situation you are in right now, whatever people are trying to take from you, whatever voices are telling you that you cannot succeed or do not deserve happiness, you can prove them wrong. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to this channel and leave a comment sharing your favorite part and hit that like button so more people who need to hear stories like this can find them. I will see you in the next one.